They didn't just take my job. They took the version of me that believed in fairness. The email arrived at 8:02 a.m., a sterile, brutal piece of digital communication that ended a decade of my life. It was from HR, with my direct boss, David Croft, copied on it. The subject line was a monument to corporate cruelty. Termination of employment effective immediately. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted through the floor, through the foundation of the building, and buried itself deep in the earth. The words blurred on the screen. Restructuring, not a reflection of your performance. Wish you the best in your future endeavors. I read it 3 times, my brain refusing to process the meaning. My office door, which had been open, swung shut with a quiet click. I looked up to see David standing there, his expression a carefully crafted mask of somber regret. Behind him were 2 large security guards, their faces blank. "Leo, I'm so sorry," David said, his voice oozing a sympathy I knew was fake. He didn't sound sorry. He sounded rehearsed. "David, what is this?" I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. I gestured weakly at the screen. "The Orion Project, it's finally turning a profit. I just sent you the figures last night. We did it. We turned it around." The Orion Project had been a money pit for 3 years. The board had wanted to scrap it, but I had begged for 1 more quarter. I'd worked nights, weekends, holidays. I had found the flaw in the marketing strategy, renegotiated the supplier contracts, and personally salvaged the relationship with our biggest client. Last night, I'd emailed David the final report, showing a projected profit of over $2 million in the next 6 months. He had replied with a single word: "Brilliant." Now he just shook his head slowly, a sad smile playing on his lips. "The board made the decision, Leo. It's above my head. It's a numbers game, you know how it is." "A numbers game," I repeated, anger beginning to cut through the shock. "I just gave you the best numbers this department has seen in years." "And your contribution has been noted," he said smoothly. "But the new direction requires a different skill set, a fresh perspective." One of the security guards took a step forward. "Sir, we need you to gather your personal belongings." He held out an empty cardboard box. It was a humiliating ritual. Under their watchful eyes, I placed my framed photo of Sarah and me on our wedding day into the box. My lucky pen. The mug that said "World's Best Dad" that my daughter, Mia, had painted for me. Each item felt like a piece of my identity being stripped away. Colleagues I'd shared lunches and laughs with for years deliberately didn't look up from their screens, their faces flushed with second-hand embarrassment. David watched me, his arms crossed. As I picked up the last item, a small, succulent plant Sarah had given me for my last birthday, he spoke again, his voice lower now, meant only for me. "It's a tough market, Leo. Honestly, at your age, you might want to consider a different field, something less demanding." The mask had slipped. The condescension in his voice was real. At your age, I was 45, he was 48. The walk out of the building, flanked by security, was the longest of my life. The automatic doors hissed shut behind me, and I stood on the busy sidewalk, clutching a cardboard box that contained my old life, feeling the cold morning air bite through my suit jacket. I was an island of stillness in a river of rushing people on their way to important jobs, with purpose and paychecks. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. How would I tell Sarah? The mortgage, Mia's college fund, the medical bills from her mother's surgery last year that had already eaten through our savings. My job wasn't just a job, it was the foundation upon which our entire life was built. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming and packing Mia's lunch. She turned, her smile bright until she saw my face and the box in my hands. "Leo, what's wrong? Did you bring work home?" she asked, her voice faltering. I couldn't speak. I just put the box on the kitchen table and looked at her. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror. The following weeks were a slow-motion car crash. The severance package was a joke 2 weeks' pay for 10 years of service. It was gone after the first mortgage payment. I applied for job after job, but the market was brutal. I was either overqualified or, as David had so kindly pointed out, too old. The rejections piled up, a mountain of polite, automated emails that chipped away at my soul. The savings account drained. The retirement fund was next. We started cutting back, no more dinners out, no more movies, canceling subscriptions. The tension in the house was a thick, suffocating fog. Sarah tried to be supportive, but fear had a grip on her too. We started having whispered arguments late at night, careful not to wake Mia. "We could sell the house," she suggested one night, her voice trembling. "And go where?" I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. "The market's down, we lose everything we put into it." The worst was Mia. She was 12, smart and perceptive. She stopped asking for new books for her voracious reading habit. She started making her own lunch to save money. One day, I found her looking at a college website on the computer. She quickly closed it when she saw me. "Just dreaming, Dad," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking she'd never be able to go. We were drowning, and I was powerless to stop it. The final blow came on a rainy Tuesday. The bank's letter was formal and final. The foreclosure process was starting. We had 30 days. That same afternoon, a trade magazine arrived in the mail. I was about to throw it out when a headline on the front page caught my eye. "Croft & Co.'s Orion project soars, leads to major promotions." I felt a coldness seep into my bones. I opened the magazine. There was a full-page photo of David Croft, smiling smugly, receiving an Innovator of the Year award. The article gushed about his visionary leadership in turning the failing Orion project into a stellar success, citing the exact figures and strategies from my report. My work, my ideas. He had taken credit for all of it. He hadn't fired me because of restructuring. He had fired me to steal my success and eliminate the one person who knew the truth. My termination wasn't a corporate decision. It was a meticulously planned theft. I sat at the kitchen table, the magazine spread out before me, the rain hammering against the windows. The self-pity and despair that had consumed me for months evaporated, burned away by a white-hot fury. I had lost my job, my savings, my home, and nearly my family. He had taken everything from me and then stood on my back to reach a higher shelf. A calmness, cold and sharp, settled over me. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. I looked at the photo of David's gloating face. A single, clear thought formed in my mind, as hard and sharp as a diamond. I am going to take it all back, and then I am going to take everything that is yours. The revenge would not be quick or emotional. It would be slow, meticulous, and absolute. I wouldn't break his windows. I would quietly buy the land his house was built on. I wouldn't yell at him in the street. I would become the reason he had to walk down that street, penniless. The first step was the hardest, swallowing my pride. We moved out of our home and into a small, cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town. It smelled of stale cigarettes and defeat. Sarah got a job as a cashier at a local grocery store. The sight of her coming home exhausted every day fueled the fire in my heart. I took a job too. It was a massive blow to my ego. I became a nighttime stock boy at a massive warehouse store. The work was physically grueling, my body ached constantly, and my colleagues were mostly teenagers who called me sir. But it was a paycheck, however small, and more importantly, it gave me the days free. While David was in his corner office, I was in the public library, using their free computers and Wi-Fi. I devoured business books, financial reports, and market analyses. I studied my old industry with a new, ruthless perspective. I wasn't learning to get a job. I was learning to build an empire. I identified the flaws in Croft & Co.'s strategy. David was riding high on the Orion success, but he was getting lazy, repeating the same patterns. He was overextending, taking on too much debt to fund new, flashy projects while neglecting the core, stable parts of the business. He was vulnerable. My idea was simple, but brilliant. The industry was moving towards integrated, all-in-one service platforms, but the big players like Croft & Co. were too slow to adapt, bogged down by their own bureaucracy. I would start a company that did just one thing, but did it perfectly, faster, and cheaper than anyone else. A lean, mean, focused machine. I called it Apex Solutions. It was just a name on a piece of paper, but it was a start. For 2 years, we lived a life of extreme frugality. Every spare penny went into Apex. I worked the night job, came home, slept for a few hours, and then worked on the business plan all day. Sarah, God bless her, saw the fire in me again and supported me completely. She became my part-time bookkeeper, managing our microscopic budget with the skill of a Fortune 500 CFO. I reached out to my old network, but carefully. I wasn't asking for a job, I was offering a vision. I found two others who had been cast aside by Croft & Co. Anya, a razor-sharp programmer who David had let go for being too assertive, and Ben, a logistics genius who was deemed not a team player. They were disillusioned, talented, and hungry for their own revenge. They joined me for a pittance and a promise of a share in the future. We operated out of my dusty apartment living room. Our office was a second-hand couch and a folding table. We survived on cheap coffee and determination. Our first client was a tiny local business that Croft & Co. would never have glanced at. We did the work for them perfectly, on time, and under budget. They were thrilled. They told another small business, and another. Apex began to grow, slowly, organically. We plowed every cent of profit back into the company. We didn't have fancy offices or company cars. We had a fanatical dedication to being better. We were the ants, working tirelessly while the grasshopper, David Croft, basked in the sun. After 3 years, we moved out of my apartment into a small, real office. It was a dump, but it was ours. We hired a few more people, the best of the best who were tired of the corporate nonsense at places like Croft & Co. I watched David's company the whole time. As I predicted, his expansion was reckless. He took on massive debt to acquire smaller competitors, but he never integrated them properly. His company became a bloated, inefficient mess. Customer satisfaction plummeted. Rumors of financial trouble began to swirl. The turning point came in year 5. Croft & Co. was preparing to launch Project Phoenix, their big, flagship new service. It was all over the industry news. David gave interviews, boasting about how it would revolutionize the market. I read the technical specs they released and smiled. It was clunky, outdated, and built on old technology. They had spent millions developing a dinosaur. We had been working on our own version in secret. We called it the Apex platform. It was faster, smarter, cheaper, and ready to launch. We timed it perfectly. The week after Croft & Co.'s lavish, expensive launch party for Project Phoenix, we quietly released the Apex platform. The contrast was stunning. Industry reviewers compared the two, and Apex was the unanimous winner. Clients began to defect. Not the small ones anymore, the big, flagship clients that were the backbone of Croft & Co.'s revenue. David was blindsided. He tried to fight back, slashing prices and launching a smear campaign against us as a fly-by-night operation. But it was too late. The market had spoken. His price cuts only dug his financial grave deeper. Within 18 months, Croft & Co. was on the brink of collapse. Their stock price, which I had been tracking with grim satisfaction, was in freefall. The board was in a panic. David was reportedly desperate, trying to secure emergency loans, but his reputation was ruined. That's when I made my move. I put on my best suit, a new one bought for this exact day. I walked into the offices of the lead investment bank handling Croft & Co.'s disastrous attempts to stay afloat. I was no longer Leo the stock boy or Leo the betrayed employee. I was Leo Evans, founder and CEO of Apex Solutions, the hottest new company in the sector. I met with the bankers who treated me with immense respect. I laid out my proposal. Apex Solutions would acquire Croft & Co. It was a reverse takeover. The minnow was swallowing the whale. My offer was low, a fraction of what the company was worth even a year ago, but it was the only serious offer on the table. The bank, desperate to recoup some of its losses, advised the Croft & Co. board to accept. The emergency board meeting was scheduled. I knew David would be there, fighting for his life. I requested to be present to answer any questions about my plans for the company. My request was granted. The day of the meeting, I felt a surreal sense of calm. I walked into the very same skyscraper I had been escorted out of 7 years prior. The security guards didn't recognize me. Why would they? I was a visitor now, an important one. I was led into the grand boardroom. It was the same room where, I later learned, David had convinced the board to fire me all those years ago. The air was thick with tension and failure. The board members, older men and women I recognized from annual reports, looked tired and defeated. And there, at the head of the table, was David. He looked aged, hollowed out. His expensive suit hung loosely on him. His eyes were shadowed with panic and lack of sleep. He was frantically shuffling papers, trying to make a last-ditch argument. He didn't look up as I entered. The head of the board, an elderly man named Mr. Sterling, gestured for me to sit. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Evans. We are reviewing your proposal," Mr. Sterling said, his voice gravelly. It was only then that David looked up. His eyes met mine. For a second, there was no recognition. I was just another suit, another vulture circling his dying company. Then his brain made the connection. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. His jaw went slack. The color drained from his face completely. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "You," he breathed, the word barely audible. "Hello, David," I said, my voice calm and even. "It's been a long time." The board members looked back and forth between us, confused. "You know Mr. Evans, David?" Mr. Sterling asked. David was speechless, staring at me with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Mr. Croft and I are acquainted," I said, answering for him. "I used to work for him a long time ago." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I learned everything I know from watching him. I didn't need to elaborate. The bitterness in my tone was unmistakable. The meeting proceeded. David was a broken man, his arguments weak and incoherent. He kept shooting glances at me, trying to process the reality of the situation. The man he had fired, discarded, and ridiculed was now sitting across from him, poised to take everything he had. The board voted. It was unanimous. They accepted my offer. Croft & Co. was mine. As the meeting adjourned and the defeated board members filed out, David remained seated, staring blankly at the polished table. I walked over to him. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate rage. "You," he spat. "You did this. You planned this." "I adapted to the market, David," I said coolly. "You taught me that. It's just business, nothing personal." I threw his own words from my termination day back at him, and I saw the sting they caused. "I'll start again," he hissed, a last flicker of defiance. "You haven't won." I leaned down, placing my hands on the table, and looked him directly in the eye. "No, David, you won't. Your reputation is garbage. Everyone knows you're a fraud who stole credit for his subordinates' work and then ran a once great company into the ground. No one will ever give you a dime again. You're finished." The defiance in his eyes died, replaced by the bleak understanding that I was right. He had nothing. "The security guards will escort you to clean out your desk," I said, straightening up. "I'd wish you the best in your future endeavors, but we both know you don't have any." I turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving him there in the ruins of his own making. The takeover was swift. I moved into the CEO office, David's old office. The first thing I did was have them remove his expensive, pretentious desk and replace it with my simple, functional one from the Apex office. On the wall, I hung a single picture, the photo of Sarah and me on our wedding day, the one I had put in the cardboard box. I didn't fire everyone. I called a company-wide meeting. The employees, from VPs to mailroom clerks, filed into the large auditorium, their faces etched with anxiety. They saw me, the new owner, the mysterious outsider who had conquered their company. I stepped onto the stage and looked out at the sea of nervous faces. Many were old colleagues. "My name is Leo Evans," I began, my voice echoing in the silent room. "Some of you may remember me. I worked here for 10 years. I loved this company. Then, 7 years ago, I was fired from this very building without warning for no good reason." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Whispers started. "I'm not here to seek revenge against any of you. The man responsible for the failures of this company is gone. I am here because I believe in what this company could be. I believe in the talent in this room that was stifled by bad leadership." I laid out my vision. I would merge the best of Apex, its agility, its innovation, its fairness. With the scale and history of Croft & Co., there would be no mass firings. There would be opportunities for everyone to prove themselves. Merit would be rewarded, not stolen. When I finished, the silence was broken by a single person clapping, then another. And then the entire auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a thunderous release of pent-up fear and hope. They weren't applauding a conqueror, they were applauding a liberator. In the following months, I worked tirelessly to rebuild. I reinstated the employees David had laid off in his panic. I gave promotions and raises based on talent, not on sycophancy. I found Anya and Ben, my original partners, and gave them senior leadership roles. We integrated the two companies, creating something new and powerful, better than either had been alone. The company, under my leadership, became profitable again within a year. The stock price recovered and then soared past its previous heights. We weren't just successful, we were respected. One evening, I worked late. The office was quiet. I stood by the large window of my office, looking out at the city lights glittering below. I held the world's best dad mug Mia had made for me, now used for pens on my desk. I thought about the day I was fired, the despair, the fear, the cardboard box. I thought of David's smug face. I thought of Sarah's fear and Mia's lost dreams. Then I thought of now. We had moved back into our house. I had bought it back from the bank. Sarah didn't have to work anymore, but she chose to lead the company's charity foundation. Mia was applying to colleges, her future wide open. The revenge was complete. I had taken everything back and then taken his company. But as I looked out at the city, I realized the victory wasn't in the possession of the office or the title. The real victory was in the life I had rebuilt. It was in the respect of my employees. It was in the light in my wife's eyes and the laughter in my daughter's voice. The door to my office opened. It was Sarah. She walked in and stood beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "You did it, Leo," she said softly, resting her head on my shoulder. "We did it," I corrected her, squeezing her hand. We stood there in comfortable silence, looking out at the lights, masters of all we surveyed. The journey had been hell, but it had led us here. The man betrayed by his boss was gone. In his place was a man who had lost everything, only to find something far more valuable, himself.